I have a very special guest today on the podcast, Matthew Lombardi.
You got it.
Who also, you're named after a hockey player.
He's named after me.
He's named after you. Okay,
I'm a little bit older than him.
The reason why I wanted to get you into the podcast, by the way, is the managing partner of OneEleven, right?
Managing director of OneEleven.
Managing director of OneEleven. The reason why I really wanted to get you into the podcast is because when Julia reached out to me and I looked into you and I looked into what you guys do at OneEleven, if there was any other job in the world that I could do, it's what you guys do, because I think you guys are around so much magic. I think, our organization, the Journey, it's really about just putting amazing founders in the room together. And just having you on, I'm sure you've seen things that, not from a success of a financial perspective, but just oh, damn, that was really nice to see. That was really special to see. So,
well, I have, but I should just tell you, maybe we should trade for a week. I kind of like the setup. You seem to have a pretty fun gig too. You've interviewed some really cool people, so maybe we should trade for a week. It'll be
well, we both have great beards.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. People won't even be able to tell the difference.
I love it. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about you, what you're doing at OneEleven? Just jump right into it.
Sure. So for people who aren't familiar with OneEleven, so we are a accelerator based in downtown Toronto. Been around since 2013. Currently, we've got 42 member companies, all of whom are software companies, Canadian founded, mostly based in Toronto, but across Ontario and a few from further afield. And we support companies that are venture backed. So post-seed, generally pre-series A. And, we try to be the preeminent space for venture-backed companies to get the support that they need to get to their Series A. Some really cool companies have come through OneEleven that people will have heard about. Wealthsimple, Coho, Maple, Borrowell, Gaddick, Clio, Jobber, the list goes on.
That's amazing.
But we're equally excited about our current member companies. So there are 42 of them right now.
Yeah.
Collectively who have raised over $700 million in follow-on financing. So
wow.
Yeah, it's a great space and it's a great community to be a part of.
Wow. Amazing. I want to talk to you about a little bit because I looked at your LinkedIn this morning and, I've just been listening to some of your videos. You started off at, I guess, Deloitte or one of the, tell me about because I was looking at your LinkedIn, you've got so much experience, but I also want to talk about the company you founded yourself. And I think that's an amazing story, but just give me a background before you were doing OneEleven.
Sure. So before I started out at OneEleven, I was a management consultant at Deloitte.
Cool.
And, that was a great gig. Made some great friends there, learned a lot. But the idea of being a management consultant forever and working your way up to partner, it was never really for me. But, an amazing place to learn some skills and build a network. And, I never did an MBA or any formal business education. So Deloitte kind of gave me that on the job training.
What'd you study in school?
I studied politics.
Oh,
so
political science.
Absolutely unrelated to being a management consultant.
Where'd you go to uni?
I went to Queen's University and then I went to the London School of Economics for a master's degree.
I'm a St. Lawrence guy.
There you go.
Yeah. So I know about the Ale House. I know about all the,
there
I know
you
all
go.
about the nightlife.
Kingston's a great place.
It's a beautiful place. Continue on.
Yeah. So this was early COVID. And so if we rewind back to, March, April of 2020, we knew absolutely nothing about how COVID spreads. People, if you recall, were still Lysol wiping their groceries down. And I have a neighbor who's a close friend of mine. His name's Dr. John Gravel. And John was, he's an emergency room physician. And so early days COVID, it's all hands on deck, but no one's actually in the hospitals. People are avoiding them like the plague. Pardon the pun. And John says to me one day, I can't get groceries. And I said, what do you mean you can't get groceries? And he says, and again, this is probably late March 2020. I can't get groceries because, I finished my shift in the hospital and I don't know what I'm walking out of the hospital carrying.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go into a grocery store and risk infecting everybody. And I said, okay, well, get a grocery delivery, Instacart, what have you. And he says, well, I can't get that either because there's a 2-week backlog at Instacart. So I said, okay, I completely understand. And, he made it very clear to me that all of the doctors and nurses and all the staff in the hospital were saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So I called my brother, who at the time was working at Instacart, one of the market leaders in Canada. And again, more context here. At that point in 2020, Toronto was the first Instacart market outside the US.
Okay.
So I called my brother and I said, medical workers are having this problem, people on the front lines of COVID. Why don't you guys just validate the medical workers, bump them to the front of the queue? And that way everybody wins, right? It's good for safety. Instacart will get a PR win. Everybody wins. So my brother says, yep, no problem. Good idea.
So it's bumping members to the queue, like
bumping medical workers.
medical
to the
workers,
front of the
medical
front of the
workers.
queue.
Sorry.
Yeah. So my brother calls me back about 24 hours later. He says, we're not going to do this. And I said, well, why not? And he said, well, we, meaning Instacart, don't really have this problem in any market except Toronto.
Yeah.
Again, Toronto is the only non-US market for Instacart. They just didn't have this capacity delivery issue in any other of their markets. So it just wasn't worth it for them to do this thing for Canadian medical workers. And so, I understood that. It annoyed me, but I understood it. So me and 4 of my buddies, all of whom worked with me at Deloitte at the time, we spun up a service. We called it Grocery Hero. We spun it up in 48 hours.
Amazing.
And it's a 2-sided marketplace platform, not for profit, and basically said, if you, Zach Ronsky, live in this postal code and you have a vehicle, you'd sign up to get groceries for me, Matthew Lombardi, a nurse who lives nearby and couldn't get a grocery delivery. And then I would reimburse you digitally. And so we ended up with 8,000 pairs of medical workers matched with their neighbors, coast to coast.
Is it more of like a help each other? Is it more of like a for profit? Like, okay, like it's a gig. Like I'm doing this.
Totally not for profit.
Okay.
Opportunity for people to help out a medical worker.
Amazing.
And it ran for about 6 months until the grocery delivery services caught up. But we ended up endorsed by the Deputy Prime Minister, by 7 different mayors across the country, 2 different premiers. And it was basically just, we stumbled upon this really simple way to, and remember, this is early lockdown.
It was so weird.
No one had anything to do.
Weird.
Right. And so you give people this way to help out locally. And everybody wanted to do it. We ended up with an average of 5 volunteers for every medical worker who signed up.
Yeah.
So Grocery Hero was an amazing experience. But what I took away from it was, when in a moment of crisis or in difficulty or, if shit hits the fan, you need a good local homegrown tech ecosystem of companies who understand our local problems. You can't rely on the Instacarts of the world.
No. It's very community based,
very
happening small.
So right around this time, OneEleven had shut down. It was one of the early victims of COVID among many organizations that happened to in March, April, May of 2020.
Yeah.
And, a number of folks suggested to me that, there's a movement to reboot OneEleven that was at the time being led by the Ontario Centre of Innovation. And, you should take a look at it if you really believe in what you're saying you believe in, right? Like we need a good local ecosystem. And OneEleven is the fundamental piece of infrastructure in the Toronto tech ecosystem to support homegrown companies. Yeah. So, it was a bit serendipitous, kind of fell backwards into the role, but I love it. And, it's been a lot of fun sort of rebooting OneEleven as an organization. Yeah. So, yeah.
I'll tell you the one, again, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, like there's a lot of consistencies between our 2 organizations that I think that there's tons of stuff to talk about. Like, when I was looking at the videos today of OneEleven, like the one thing that really stood out to me, like it wasn't, the companies are cool. They're amazing. We're going to talk about them. The one thing that really had my heart was like just putting people in a room together, the community aspect of it, like the relationships that are built there. And that's what I think is the most magical thing. Like what you said with the whole idea of like when you were building the company you were working on, right? Like putting these people together and just making it kind of happen. So I'd love to actually talk to you a little bit about like, the OneEleven reboot and like, what are you guys kind of focusing on now? Like, what are you guys kind of working on now? What's the day-to-day kind of looking like?
Yeah. It's exciting. And I'm glad that, enough time has passed that I can tell you about something that now functions and works really well. Amazing. So I started out in August 2020 at OneEleven. My first day there, they handed me an 80-page lease obligation for the floor. We run a 55,000 square foot facility down at Front and Blue Jay. A call list of all the companies that,
may be interested,
may have been members before from when it shut down, and a set of keys. And you sort of,
hopefully desks too, right?
Yeah, there are some desks. So you sort of walk into this, I know you've been down there, Zach, but for folks who haven't, it's this enormous workspace, and it's empty, and it feels even bigger when it's empty. And, there's upturned coffee cups, and, the place is a mess because, like many organizations, it had physically,
it's like
closed
Chernobyl,
its doors.
Like, just like
it had physically closed its doors early COVID, and no one had been back since. So I sort of walked in there and I went, oh boy, what did I sign up for?
Yeah.
And if you recall, August 2020, we still didn't have a vaccine rollout.
Yeah.
And it was incumbent upon me to say, okay, what can an organization like this do to actually add value to seed-backed companies absent being able to use the space? And we sort of had to pretend that all of the things OneEleven used to leverage, its convening power, the collaborative location, they just may not be available to us for the foreseeable future. And it ended up being, we're in and out of lockdown for quite a bit of time after that, right? But that was a good forcing function for us. We couldn't just throw the doors open and say we're OneEleven again. We actually had to determine what we could do to be useful in the ecosystem. And so we brought on Venture for Canada, an amazing organization dedicated to youth entrepreneurship and talent and training to help us out. And we went and basically did a series of consultations, I guess you would call them, basically just talking to all of the alumni, different VCs in the ecosystem. And we asked them this exact question. Pretend we can never use the space ever again.
Yeah.
What would OneEleven do to add value that's smart, that's actually measurable, that could be attributable, that nobody else is doing, and that fits for seed-backed companies? And so we started to hear this archetype emerge, right?
Yeah.
Founders would say, at the moment I joined OneEleven, we had just raised $3 to $4 million in venture, a professional round, not a family and friends round, but from professional investors.
Serious money,
who had very aggressive growth targets and expectations. So we just raised $3 to $4 million in our first professional investor round. We had 5 to 10 employees, give or take.
Okay.
And everything was good. But at that stage, we were growing so rapidly that in the 18 months to 2 years average tenure that we were at OneEleven, we 4X'd, we 5X'd our headcount. We ended up with 40 people, 50 people.
So not a place that they could scale.
No, they could scale, but the problem when they were scaling was they would say, that first guy, that Zach Vronsky that I hired, 26 years old, was great as an individual contributor, as my first product person or my first customer success person. But as soon as Zach had to manage all these new people, once we grew to a 20, a 30, a 40 person team,
I struggled.
It was a totally different skill set. And what we then further surfaced was, in the entire incubator accelerator ecosystem, it's very founder focused. Mm-hmm. Founders can get almost anything they want if they just reach out and ask. People will talk to founders.
Of course.
There's almost nothing for the people right below the founders.
Yeah, no support system for them. Right. Like the ones that, fair.
So we decided very purposely, we're going to sort of leave the founders alone to build their businesses, do investor relations, all the things that a founder has to do.
Yeah.
And we're going to instead take that training and talent burden off their plates.
Yeah.
Right. Give us the people just below you, who are in many cases first-time people managers. And we chose to focus in 3 specific areas. So product, customer success, and marketing.
Cool.
And we've built all of our programming around the concept of training and upskilling those people just below the founder, who are in most cases first-time people managers in their careers. And they're just as critical to the company's success, right? Yeah. Getting to that Series A, right? Those people need to be trained and upskilled as fast as the company's actually scaling. So we've now spent just about 2 years perfecting, iterating that programming.
Yeah. And what's the program called? Does it have a specific name, or is it just kind of
We haven't branded it yet.
Yeah. Okay.
but that's what we do. That's our value add, right? That's the one thing that we do the best in the entire ecosystem is we're upskilling the people just below the founder.
Yeah.
Making sure they can grow with the company. And talent is so important. It's so expensive. It's at a premium, right? Unemployment is at an all-time low. Talent remains at a premium despite gyrations in the ecosystem. And founders love it. So
100%.
2 years on, founders tell us that our programming helps them with employee retention.
Yeah.
Now, the fun part, as you've now seen, Zach, when you've been to the office, is now there's an event every single night. We're hosting TechTO, Fuck Up Nights, charity fundraisers, community events. So now we get to sort of make treaty between the old value prop of OneEleven, which is, that community space, community hub, and the new value prop, which is the programming, the learning, the upskilling, the training of talent. So it's a lot of fun now. It was a tougher gig, 2 years ago, a year ago, but it's we're in a great place now.
Well, I definitely say from an outside perspective, I think you're leading the company to success. I think you very much being in your position, I can imagine it was like 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out the door, like kind of slowly coming in, slowly coming out in terms of what the strategy is going to be, adjusting to what's going on with COVID. What I really like about this learning program is we're like our company, like we're all like partners at in-house. That's our other company as well that actually pays the bills. And for me, at least, like I find as a founder, like I'm learning every single day and I don't have a choice to learn because, like we're too deep in, right? Like we have to keep going. But I can only imagine that if I had, people under me, having them learn the right things, maybe learning how to write an RFP, maybe learning about how to become more discoverable through marketing, maybe working on product, whatever it is. I think that's so key. Can you tell me a little bit about the people that are running the courses? Are you bringing companies like that were really successful at OneEleven and having like these people come do like a workshop? Like, how are you kind of approaching that?
Yeah. So the overall programming philosophy for how we're building this upskilling program is there's very little unique content creation. What we found is, again, through talking to people, is a lot of what you need out there is already in the ecosystem, right? There are great organizations like Juno College, BrainStation, General Assembly, who've got, a module here, a mini course there, a micro credential here.
Yeah.
And it was just incumbent upon us to say, okay, you, Zach, might be a product guy at, this one company, and, you might want to pay for this one module. What we can actually do as OneEleven, because we're curating member companies who are at the same stage of growth, is we were able to surface and are able to surface common problem sets across our member companies.
Yeah.
And then say, okay, Zach, we are going to actually go and procure these 4 modules from these 4 providers, package it up into something resembling a curriculum, and deliver it to you and all of the other member company product people who are facing, again, similar problem sets. So it's more of a curate and deliver model rather than creating net new content, which I think is kind of the responsible thing to do, right? Like being a good ecosystem player, making sure you're leveraging all the things that are out there. Mm-hmm. And also, content creation's not the thing that we're best at. We're best at making sure people are, we're facilitating people getting the right training at the right moment.
Okay. So sourcing the best places to learn essentially, and like kind of putting it all together for them to take in as they go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What I love, again, and again, the journey kind of shares this with OneEleven, is like, we're all about kind of, let's just put a bunch of people in a room and like, let's see what magic happens. Because when you do that with founders, magic will happen. And it didn't really click at the beginning, but I did figure out that, let's say, I was going to start a business that you were running for 10 years and you're kind of out of the game. Just a 2-minute conversation, a 5-minute conversation with you in the washroom or by the washroom or at the water cooler.
We'll save you 100 emails.
100 emails.
200
money,
Slack messages.
Time, mistakes. Your mistakes can pass on to me.
Absolutely.
I think that, and I'm going to move to my other point too, but I think anyone listening that's in this position to look for a space to work or in a place to kind of incubate and really do that, I think that's one of the biggest value adds that's super important. So yeah, they have events and they have these programs for learning as well too, but this magic of kind of being around people and other founders that are fighting the same battles as them. It's so important. The journey was created because founders is one of the most underrepresented like positions. It's like, there's not really like how do you do this? Right. You want to become a firefighter. There's training, there's people, right? So it's something like that. I was going to ask you, what are some examples of companies right now at OneEleven that you're just like, wow, this is awesome to see them grow. This is awesome. Like some success stories of, while your time there have kind of jumped on and just, I know, you just did a YouTube video about it, but I'd love you to talk more about that. Some of the ones that are really doing well.
So I'll come back to this, but I just want to talk a little bit about your point about those serendipitous interactions, like bumping into somebody.
Magic.
They're magic. And there's a recent Harvard study out late last year that proves empirically what, people have known for years in these sorts of creator spaces, let's call them, that proximity is so critically important for creativity, culture building, learning best practices, making sure that you're getting the fullness of communication, right? The body language, all the things you can't replicate on Zoom. And the last thing that I think is so important that people are missing out on, mentorship, coaching, sponsorship, especially earlier in your career. Mm-hmm. I got to speak at the Venture for Canada All Things People Summit last year, and I was asked by a group of young, soon-to-be graduates, what's a piece of advice that might be a little bit counter to trends that you want to leave us with? And I said, look, if you're 21 and you're coming out of school and you're looking for your first job that's going to be fully remote and that's really important to you, and you want to be a digital nomad, you want to live in the Bahamas 3 months a year, that is the worst thing you can do for your career.
You won't learn.
Well, you won't learn, and you won't, again, get the benefit of those in-person hours of mentorship and sponsorship. When I think about my career, my entire 20s, it was really important that I got those in-person hours, the lunches, the coffees, the running into somebody at the coffee machine. all of the people who have looked out for me my whole career, I
Yeah.
can't imagine replicating those relationships if it was fully remote when I started out. And so while I'm glad that the bad old days of, presenteeism, you have to be in the office 5 days a week are gone,
Yeah.
because that was equally detrimental for a lot of reasons. The concept of 0 days a week in person with your team is equally horrible.
Yeah.
So, I think spaces like OneEleven are really healthy because you can experiment with your footprint needs. You can find that right level of flexibility. So I think, anything that has a co-working element to it is super important and critical right now for culture building as a team.
I also think, again, like I mentioned, putting these people in a room together, it's super important to also remember that, like, these young people that you were talking to, like, I'm sure they're on Instagram, I'm sure they're on TikTok. And like you and I both know that there's like these people that will, post a picture with their dad's Ferrari. And there's this like, there's this whole thing about like, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a founder, look how much money I make. Like, I got all the secrets. But the secret really, to at least what I've learned in running the journey and meeting all these founders, is no one has the secrets. There are up days and down days. And I think when you put these people in the space there, it's like, man, you have this space. And this is, again, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. You have this space where like, I could have had the worst fucking day of my life. Like, we lost 3 of our biggest clients. Like, it's bad. And you kind of come in and you're just talking about, I don't know, something that you're very passionate about or something that you just accomplished. And like that energy kind of just, it's hard to explain, but maybe the Harvard study talks a little bit about it. It kind of, it's almost like a yawn, or it's a contagious, right? Like it just goes to each other, right? So I think that's super important. One
of the founders around OneEleven described this to me a couple of weeks ago. He said, I have my most productive days when I'm here because I'm into this ritual. I walk to work in the morning. It's the chime of the elevator early in the morning before anyone else gets in. It's the sound of the coffee machine making his macchiato. We have a really fancy coffee machine. It's the sound of the doors opening with when you swipe your key card in. And he considers all those sort of sounds and sights and smells part of his routine that you don't get when you're at home, kind of isolated behind a Zoom screen.
Yeah.
All of that stuff, I think, is part of, you're around a really young, dynamic group of people who are all, as founders, to your point, they're going through those ups and downs, those ebbs and flows. Mentally, they can lean on each other. And again, you need to do that stuff in person.
No, 100%. No, it really hit me. I mean, like, first year of business was kind of just like make tons of mistakes. And I didn't really even understand that you can lean on people, but like, especially this past year, like keeping it going and like, along with my team, like talking to other companies, talking to other people. How are you doing? How are you feeling? How do you keep it going? What are you learning? What are you listening to? It's super, super important. And just to go back to your point, I think maybe for the younger generation, if anyone's listening, I think you really should be taking advantage of all those opportunities to go and meet with people. You also made an interesting point too. You talked about how there was people in your life or an early career, what you were saying just now, that, that kind of helped you get through it. And just for anyone listening and even just this conversation, for me personally, like I can name 2 people that, if I didn't talk to them, I wouldn't be here now, because people that you meet are kind of like trees or branches, and they branch off, and then you meet this person and then you meet that person. The next thing you know, you're doing all these different things. And I feel like those relationships happen 100 times better in person than, like, it can still happen online, right? But
I don't think so. I don't think it can happen online at all. You're just not getting the depth of connection if you've only ever met somebody online.
Yeah, fair. I'd love you to talk about some of the companies that are there now.
Absolutely.
And what they're all about, what they're working on.
Look, we've got we've got 42 member companies. It's tough to choose among them because they're all so exciting. But I selected 2 that I wanted to talk about.
Sure.
Just because they've got new product launches that are timely. So
Cool.
For anyone listening, we're not picking favorites here.
Yeah.
So the first company is called Efficiency Capital. Efficiency Capital is doing performance guaranteed energy retrofits for commercial buildings. And commercial buildings in urban centers like Toronto are the number 1 source of carbon emissions. Yeah. The absolute number 1 by a factor. And so they've just received, they just raised a $50 million line of credit from the Canada Infrastructure Bank, which is a massive, massive, massive accelerator for their business. And they're basically turning energy retrofits into a service that other companies can purchase from them as sort of an all-in-one package. They're also helping us to make OneEleven more energy efficient.
Yeah.
We're going through a process of, we're in a very old building. Our space is beautiful, but the building's old. And so there are a number of things that, we're having efficiency capital help us, put our money where our mouth is type of thing. That's one. The second really interesting company, and again, totally different, it's called Fable. So Fable is focused on accessibility in the online space.
Yes.
So they just raised their, a $10 million round USD last year. And they are basically, think about a new product feature on Shopify or on Walmart or on any e-commerce website, right? All of those things need to be accessible. Screen readers, people who are hearing impaired, any type of accessibility that you would see in the physical world, equally important in the digital world, especially as more and more commerce moves online. And so Fable is basically the company that is creating and testing all of those designs of all of those online products. And they employ a number of people who, have some sort of physical disability as testers, as product designers, as advisors, people with lived experience in the accessibility space, which is really exciting.
Yeah. Do you know, like, I'd probably have a better conversation with the founder, but like, do you have any case studies of stuff that they've kind of come and implemented? Success stories?
You know what? We've all got Fable case studies because I guarantee you every single person listening has used an e-commerce function or feature in the last, call it 30 days that Fable's contributed to.
Really?
Absolutely.
Can you give me an example of something like that?
So don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure they've got Shopify as a client.
Okay.
So if you've used Shopify, you've seen Fable's work in action.
Yeah. So I'm trying to get like a better understanding. Like, so like, what is it more so like text to speech type things on a website? Like what?
Yeah. Text to speech would be one example. Yeah. Anything to do with, say the, how the rounds are on a particular button, is that, for someone who's visually impaired, right? Is it to spec so that they can actually use it with their specialized software? Is it integrated? Is it possible for someone to actually have a user experience if they've got any sort of impairment?
Okay. Interesting. Now, like stepping back to I just want to go to like a bigger picture of like Toronto's tech ecosystem, right?
Sure.
Everyone involved. What are your thoughts on that? Like, what do you think where it's going right now? Like, obviously tech has taken like a big hit. Like it's been a little bit of a bloodbath, a little bit more in the States, but really when I got into my career doing what I'm doing, like Toronto is really a tech capital in its own rights for sure. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on terms where that market is going, in the future and what's kind of going on there and
Absolutely.
what you're hearing.
Look, I think there's a narrative out there that, it's been a tough little bit in the tech space. And it's true that there's been a significant sort of gyration, in the market, both in terms of the big techs and then, further upstream into the private tech ecosystem and earlier funding rounds. But by and large, these ebbs and flows will happen.
Yeah.
But by and large, the Toronto ecosystem is still on a macro growth trajectory. So, right, still, the majority of companies at OneEleven and the majority of tech companies are still hiring, despite what you may hear. It's a very healthy sector. Year over year, I still expect by the end of 2023, we'll have net job growth overall in tech in Toronto, in Ontario, in Canada. Yeah. And when you look at where the Canadian tech sector and where the Toronto tech sector was, not just 10 years ago, but even 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, we're still on a really healthy growth trajectory. You'll have to adjust the statistics to take into account that 2021 and 2022 were record years. Yeah. 2020 and 21 were record years in VC. But in general, that trend line is still up and to the right in terms of jobs, in terms of funding, in terms of new companies founded. Yeah. There's amazing infrastructure from, Mars and the DMZ, the OneElevens. There are new VC firms who are closing new funds right now. Yeah. I very much expect that it's early innings in the growth of Toronto's tech ecosystem, right? I think both you and I, and pretty much everyone who's been involved in this podcast today, all have jobs that, when we were graduating college or university didn't exist at the time, which is amazing. And that's going to continue to be a trend.
Amazing. We used to do like these events at Good. Yeah. Something incredible happened the first event. I don't know if you know this lady, Cece. Her name's Cece Spicy. She's like very like popular in the CPG space. She's got like this chili oil. She came in, she brought her product, and this guy Daniel Bennon came in too. Yeah. And he brought like a product that like cleans your phone. It's like this big, you put it in, UV light type thing. Yeah. And like this magical thing happened where everyone just kind of like went around them and talked to them. What the journey was really early on is like bridging the gap between CPG founders and tech founders. So we're both founders in our own right. Okay. We want to double down on the CPG. Yeah. So we're looking at doing at your office. So we're going to set up a bunch of tables for CPG founders, and it's going to be one big networking market. Cool. Where get a bunch of people in, get a bunch of founders. If they want to sell, they can sell their product. But it's really just about like, you know, just shit like where it's like, yo, like this is sick. How did you do this? What's your, just like you have to put the communities in. I don't know if we're rolling right now, but one of the questions that was really important on my list is you have to be a master of community because you're, you know, this is one of the most important things of OneEleven. What are some secrets? And I think community marketing or building communities for companies is super important. When you look at community at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, when you're planning, what are you doing to make this community really stand out? What are you doing to make this the most incredible incubator community of founders in Toronto?
Got it. So look, it's evolved, right? Because as I said, you know, we rebooted OneEleven entirely remotely at first. And, you know, that was something that we really struggled with. How do you create and maintain a community when all of the programming you're delivering is entirely online, right? And it first of all, it forced the quality bar for anything we did, from a lunch and learn series to a digital social, to be so high, because you know, at that stage of COVID, getting people to do one more optional Zoom in a day was really tough.
You want to go see your kids.
The quality bar had to be really high. Now that we're able to do hybrid, remote, in-person delivery, you know, it makes it a little bit easier, but, you know, that quality bar started out high in terms of content delivery.
Yeah.
You know, now we get to add that sort of in-person flavor and context. Yeah. So that's really helpful. But, you know, we've now reached a point where between, you know, tech TO, like this past week, it's been tech TO on Monday, you know, fuck up nights on Tuesday. We had a law firm partner of ours hosting an information session on the Wednesday about, you know, how to structure a round and, you know, safes and all the different funding mechanisms for raising a round. So it's everything from informational to marketing. Last week we did a charity poker tournament for the Sick Kids Foundation. And
is that the Poker Stars one?
That it's not the Poker Stars one. It's separate. But this one was hosted by Front Funder, which is another very cool OneEleven member company that does equity crowdfunding. Check them out. But you know, we've now reached a point where content becomes marketing, becomes events, becomes programming. It sort of mashes all into one, because all of it falls under the broad banner of how is the community, you know, enjoying hanging out with one another, enjoying learning from one another, enjoying socializing with one another, and getting those informal moments where, you know, you're not feeling like you're at a work event. You're feeling like, you know, I'm having a drink, meeting this new person. And then it turns out, much like your example, hey, hang on, we have something in common. Maybe we can do business together. Maybe we can help one another out. Yeah. So, you know, I'd say the three lessons around creating community are: one, start small, you know, be iterative, take feedback. You know, we started out with community programming, again, pre-vaccine, all entirely online. And we just had to iterate, take feedback. You know, what do you want to start, stop, and continue? How do you make sure that your satisfaction scores, we measure it by NPS, remain high, because you're making your customers and your community members happy? So start small, be iterative. Two, listen, right? Listen to what people are telling you, listen to the feedback. Just because we think that someone needs something doesn't mean that we're delivering it the right way. It doesn't mean that it's come at the right moment, right? Timing is just as important as content, as delivery. So start small, take feedback. And then I think the third thing is you have to have fun.
Yes.
Right? All work and no play kind of thing. You know, we are delivering high quality educational programming. We are delivering value to the OneEleven community, but you've got to do it in a fun way, right? Like put out some pizzas, you know, have the social be offsite sometimes, make sure that there are beverages, alcoholic and non, you know, mix it up, do, you know, charity poker tournament. You know, it can't all be the exact same thing. You know, having people just sit in chairs and be talked at all the time. You know, break them up into one-on-ones, break them out into engaging group discussions, you know, all the different ways that we've experimented. But, you know, it's got to be a fun environment, because, you know, learning outside of school has to be structured differently. So those would be the three tips. But, you know, there's not really a secret sauce. It's just a matter of, you know, constantly paying attention and adjusting and adapting and making sure that, you know, you're keeping your customers in mind first.
What is, you know, I'm a founder. If I was a founder, I just finished my seed round, right? No, my Series A, I guess. I'm ready to look for an office. Got some good employees in Toronto. Why am I looking at OneEleven? Why should I be looking at OneEleven? What does my day look like?
Sure. Yeah. So we talk to companies all the time. Probably 10 to 12 companies a month are formally applying to OneEleven, but we're talking to a lot more companies than that. Oftentimes we're talking to them a bit earlier, right? They haven't quite raised their seed round. But for companies who have raised their seed, we hope we've generally already talked to them, right? We've seen them at a DMZ event. We've seen them at a pitch night. We've seen them upstream. Generally we're trying to keep track of them, trying to understand, have they grown to a point, and it's generally right after the seed, have they grown to a point, or are they about to grow to a point where we can actually add value, right? Yeah. They have enough team members and they're growing quickly enough that our programming makes sense for them, and we're ready to plug them into our community, and they're ready to participate, right? Yeah. A lot of times companies are a bit too early. There's only, it's two co-founders, and, they're still trying to get to an MVP. They don't yet have product market fit of any sort, looking for their first customer. We're not ready to help those people, and they're not ready to access our supports, but we're keeping track of them, and we're making sure that we're plugging them into the right people, helping them, raise
you want them to succeed. You
want them to succeed.
You meet to succeed.
Hoping that they can raise a round, connecting them with different VCs and angel investors whenever we can. Trying to make sure we're paying it forward and upstream in the ecosystem. But if you're a founder who's just raised a seed round, I can't think of a better place and a more supportive community than OneEleven, because you're going to get to meet founders who are just a little bit further along than you in the journey.
But they can give so much advice.
See how I worked in the journey there?
No, I like that. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. I'm also curious in terms of how are you evaluating these companies? Is it just you're obviously not just looking at their books? I'd love to see how you're evaluating these companies when they join the OneEleven community. Sure,
yeah. So our application process is super simple. Companies have to fill out our online form. Takes 5 to 6 minutes. We're collecting basic data on, are you meeting the quantitative criteria, right? Have you reached the raise threshold? It's a minimum $1 million. Most of our companies have raised quite a bit more than that in seed. Or you've bootstrapped your way to $1 million in annual recurring revenue, which we're seeing more and more of. And then what we do is we'll have an interview, and the interview process is basically just about bringing some of our current member companies, often in adjacent businesses or spaces, and just talking through what it's like to be a member of the community, what the supports look like, making sure there's a fit, number one. And number two, making sure that we're bringing people into the community who want to participate, right? Because there is a peer learning aspect that's so important. And, if folks, you're going to get out of it what you put into it for sure.
Yeah, of course. No, that's amazing. Getting these people all together and doing stuff like that. No, it's definitely interesting to see what's going on and watching it. What do you think the future of OneEleven is? Where are we in 10 years from now? What's going on? Are you guys going to take over the whole building?
No, we're signed up to go to Mars on Elon's first shuttle.
Oh, beautiful.
We've got office space up there already. No, look, the future of OneEleven is, by the end of this calendar, the space will be physically full.
Amazing.
At that point, we're going to have to think about, is there expansion in the future? Is there an opportunity to add a new service, right? Right now, we function by offering, one, the turnkey collision space and office space, and two, our value add programming, right? The upskilling. Is there an opportunity to do more in terms of expanding out our programming to address different areas where we can help? Folks have suggested to us that OneEleven needs to think about some sort of strategic partnership where we can actually add capital, right?
Yeah.
Which we currently don't do. So that's the type of initiative and strategic project that we're considering.
So essentially I don't know, I'm not the finance guy, but essentially adding on an investment bank area of it where they're also investing to some of the companies that they're dealing with.
Yeah, not quite an investment bank, but is there a venture aspect where OneEleven can make sure that we're able to write checks or, again, facilitate our member companies being able to raise in a more direct way?
Yeah, fair. Well, look, one last question for you. I'm very curious. You ever at the end of the day just go downstairs and go to that aquarium? You ever?
The Ripley's Aquarium?
You ever just go this was a tough day?
You know what? I've never been to the Ripley's Aquarium.
You should go.
I've never been, but I will tell you on this topic. So I'm actually on the board of directors of the Toronto Zoo. So I really encourage listeners, go to the zoo, not the aquarium.
Can we talk about the zoo before we wrap it up? What are you doing on the zoo board? What do you exactly do?
So, general governance oversight, making sure the finances are in order, all of those fiduciary duties that a board member has to do. But, I grew up going to the Toronto Zoo, so it's my favorite place in the whole entire city. And, I feel pretty lucky to be able to contribute to it.
funny story, actually, one of our earlier projects, we did a project where the zoo decided they were going to take some poop and they were going to turn it into energy.
There you go.
Just right by the parking lot, right? That area right there. So we actually went early on and we were filming it, getting created that space. I'm sure you're aware of like that.
Absolutely.
That project, yeah.
The Toronto Zoo is the most important conservation organization in Canada.
Yeah, and they've got beautiful trails around it too. Guys, this is the JourneyCast. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you want to learn more about the journey, go to www.takethejourney.co. However, if you want to learn more about OneEleven, one of Canada's most proud incubators that are happening in Toronto, go to
www.oneeleven.com.
OneEleven.com. They're hosting events. They've got an incredible community. And one really important point that I want to share across founders that are listening to, you might not meet the requirements to join OneEleven community, but I can definitely assure that like these people want the people in the ecosystem to succeed. Reach out to them, talk to them, go to some events that they have. You can learn a lot. And like I mentioned, we also have an event coming up with them. We're going to be doing a really cool CPG business networking market where CPG founders can come, meet amazing people in the network, learn, and just kind of have a really, really great time. Matthew, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart from coming onto the podcast. Just talking to you. You're definitely like just looking at where you're going and what you're doing. It's something that I just get so into and the passion you have doing it. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Zach. And thanks to the whole Journey team.
Beautiful.